What does it mean to be gay? Where do we come from? Why now? What's our purpose? What's our future? What is our function? How do we activate our power?
Hey everyone, Paul Angelo here. Welcome to another extraordinary video about gay sexuality. This video is mastery level. You are going to learn a lot about sex, about why you crave it a lot. You will learn about how to have the best sex ever. I'm going to teach you that in this video. I'm going to also teach you fundamentals of psychology that relate to gay sexuality. We are going to have to define what does it mean to be gay? What does it mean to be gay? What is gayness? Because the sexuality that we want to talk about is the kind of sexuality that applies to a gay identity. Okay, so we're not going to talk about sex out there, any kind of sex that's possible. No, we're going to constrain it and we're going to contain it in a kind of way that matches the psychological needs and requirements of a gay man for healthy functioning and healthy life and life of happiness, and of course connecting that life with love. So the kind of sex that definitely is compatible with love. So this video is going to be a deeper dive. I've recorded many other videos about anal intercourse, about sex. Some of them will be listed below this video, and I opened up to the public the videos about anal sex. I closed them down for many months and I reopened them, and I have the links down below this video. So take advantage, watch those videos, because there's a lot of psychology, there's a lot of depth to our sexual behavior. Your sex life is in essence the mirror of your psychology. Did you know that? And so understanding sex is like learning a new language. It's like you don't speak French, you learn French or you learn Spanish, and it takes a while to learn that language, and then you speak it, you understand it. The same thing is with sex. It's like a language of self-understanding, understanding of your body, and the inner dialogue that's cooking up in your head, all the sexual fantasies, all the crazy sexual desires that you have. You want to understand where it's coming from. And it's coming from all kinds of places. It's not coming out of the ether. No, your sexual fantasies don't appear in your head out of ether. No, those sexual fantasies come out of your innermost being. The deepest parts of you are communicating with the metaphysical world around you through touch, through sensory adaptations. And for those adaptations to take place, they have to take place actually. The touching has to take place. And so sex and your innermost being, it's like two ends on the opposing sides. On one end is your deepest unconscious motivations that have to come to fruition. And then on the outside, the touching with the world that's around you, the actual touch, the actual experience of matter. So there is a lot of metaphysics about sex. Sex is not just sex. We're talking about the connection of something invisible with something that's visible, something that actually exists in the real world. And you do this by touch. And so touch is a big deal. And we need to start right here so that you understand why we are talking about this. To touch someone or to touch something is actually quite a big deal in psychology, in metaphysics, in existentialism. When you touch something, there's a lot going on here. And especially when you touch another living being, there is so much going on there that you have to be careful how you touch another human being. And also how they touch you. And so the reason why we talk about sexuality here is because everything in your life will depend on your ability to understand what touch is all about. You're touching everything and everyone, and they're touching you, and you're rubbing against objects and people. So the whole concept of touching, the whole concept of your sensory mechanisms, the production of your arousal, the definition of your attraction mechanisms, all of that is metaphysics. It's not just sexuality. It's your relationship to reality through touch. And with sex, it starts with sexual fantasies, sexual thoughts, all things cooking up in your head. And then through all kinds of motivations and arousals, you want to act it out in the real world. So there's something really unique and really human about this. It's not a primitive experience of humanity. It's actually quite sophisticated experience of humanity. But there are aspects of it that are very primitive, that actually take us down, that destroy us, that are real risks to avoid. And so sexuality has those places too. Places of danger. Real danger. And you as a human being have to discover what that means. And sexuality is quite risky, can be risky. Sex can kill you. Sex can destroy you. Sex can actually derail the entire direction of your life into a direction that you would have otherwise never pursued. And how? Well, haven't you been in a situation you just walked around and then saw somebody beautiful and they gave you their attention? You otherwise would have never been with them, but because the sex they gave you is so amazing, you went back. And then you went back again. And then 10 years later, he's still in your life, imposing his beliefs, his value systems on you that otherwise you would have never come across if you've never had that sex with him. So one sexual experience can set into motion a domino effect that in essence become a certain reality for you, inside of which you live for many, many, many years. It's like living in a basement and never coming out of the house. Certain sexual practices can lead to certain partners that take us hostage into a reality, an experience of life that is so narrow that we have to be careful not to let that happen. And that's how sex kills us all. In fact, the motivation why we should be having this discussion is because you should by this time be very, very, very self-aware that sex is your weakness. It's not your strength. So let's get this out of the way. Sexual behavior, sexual arousal, all the sexual fantasies, we can't call it it's your strength. It's something that derails you. It's something that takes you away, that distracts you, that sends you from your original path into an alternative path. I've never seen a situation when sex has taken someone from a bad place into a good place. I've never seen a situation like that. I've never seen a situation in my life, and I've had a lot of sex with a lot of different people, inside of loving relationships, outside of them. I've never witnessed a moment when sexual behavior has taken me or has taken anybody else from a bad place to a good place. Sex only works the other way around in most cases. It takes you from a good place or neutral place into a bad place. For most people, that's their experience of sexuality. I mean, if sex was so wonderful, why aren't we all in loving relationships because of that wonderful sex? So as you see, there's so much more to sexual behavior. There's so much more to the psychology of sex. It's a pretty sophisticated world, complex world. It is a world because it touches upon our existential needs. It is an aspect of your sexual fantasies. It has connection to your visceral body and your sensory engine. So sex is everything. Sex is all around you, either directly or indirectly. So understanding the mechanisms behind it, understanding why you're so driven to be so sexual, understanding your arousal engine, understanding your hormonal balancing, understanding your arousal, how it then turns into attraction formula, like a recipe. That would be helpful because then you can navigate through the world of sex. You can navigate through the world of the complexities of the world of sex. So this is very helpful for the rest of your life. I'm here to tell you something. I have 2 master's degrees, and I believe that learning about sex is more important than having a master's degree or 2. Your ability to move forward in your life will be faster if you understand sex thoroughly, faster than someone who doesn't understand sex but has 2 master's degrees, because that person will become victim to their irrational fantasies, to their emotions, their arousal, their misunderstanding about sex, and they're going to end up spending time like 10 years or 20 years or maybe even their whole life with the wrong person, all because of something that has to do with sex. So imagine removing all the frustrations about sexuality. Imagine what that will do to your life. I don't think you can imagine this because this is unimaginable. For most of us, we are so hostage to the world of sex. We are held hostage, we are victims, and we are slaves to our sexual impulses, our engine of attraction. We are run by all of that. We are not in control of it. Now, sex is one of those things that always wins. Sex always wins. Unfortunately, that's the bad news. Sex always wins. However, you can be navigating that powerful energy inside you in such a way that then sex becomes your friend, as opposed to sex being your enemy and then running your life and then dictating the terms of your life. Sex always wins because it's such a potent energy. For the rest of your life, you will be either craving sex, you'll be curious about sex, and we're going to talk about why that happens. So you will learn why those cravings never go away. And so for the rest of your life, you will be seeking sex, seeking everything sexual. You'll be jealous of people that are having sex. You will always be jealous about others who are having all the sex that you wish you had. And that sexual jealousy is a real thing. And in fact, that is a pretty serious jealousy. It's like when you find out that someone found someone that you would have loved to have sex with and he's having sex with him, that can drive you crazy. That can make you super jealous and like fall apart one day. So this takes place fast. Why? Because sex is such an essential part of our nature, our psychic. And unfortunately, we have not been taught anything about sexuality. Sexual education is very primitive, and sexual education is conducted by people who themselves have not completed themselves sexually. So when you listen to me talk to you about sex, I come to you from having been in the gay world, in the world of sexuality over the past 25 years. I came out super early, at 19. And my first sexual experiences started at a moment when they happened at a good timing on a developmental level for me. I never was abused. I never had a sexual experience prior to the age of 19 that kind of tore me apart because it came in too early. So I lacked out. I had full completion of my teenage years. Then sexuality comes in, and right away I enter into a loving relationship. So I never let myself go sexually, and I preserved that innocence. Yet at the same time, I was able to gently enter into the world of sex through a relationship. And then when it ended on my own in my 20s through my own experimentation, already having had the loving experience, so having the beginning of sex, starting with that innocent loving process as opposed to the volatile hookup culture that right now all the younger people have no choice but fall into. I did not have to do that. But I've had a lot of experiences of sexuality from all kinds of different perspectives in my 20s that allowed me to see the entire spectrum of the possibilities of the world of sex. Sex in public, sex in bathhouses, group sex, one-on-one sex, sex in three ways, in clothing optional places. I've seen all of that. I've seen all the sex in parks. I've been there. I've done most of that. So I don't talk to anybody down in the context of sexuality, but I also recognize that some of those behaviors were risky and some of those behaviors should have been avoided. And had I had this video on these teachings in my 20s, I would have been able to avoid 80% of that sexual exploration that was actually a waste of time. I would have been able to condense, say, 10 years of sexual exploration into maybe 3 years. And that is helpful because you don't want to be experimenting with sex for the rest of your life. You want to condense it. You want to learn everything you've got to learn from it. Do it all of it. Exercise all impulses, all urges. Manifest your sexual fantasies. Do it all right there, right then in those 2 to 3 years. And then you are ready to settle into relationships. So I don't talk down to anybody because you are bad for craving those sexual fantasies, those sexual behaviors, anal sex, and the rest of it. I've done it. I understand it fully and completely. But sex is not really our life. It's like living in a basement, never leaving the house, experiencing the real world of purpose and vision. So sex is there, but it's not really all of it. And so you have to have a perspective on it that's helpful to categorize it, organize it, and compartmentalize it such that it doesn't get out of hand, doesn't ruin you, doesn't take over you, because there's something on the inside that's missing and you're looking to complete it through sex for the rest of your life. And I believe that through my experiences of sexuality, my understanding of it, and all the years I've spent thinking about it, I can offer you a formula for sexuality that, number one, gives you the healthy experience of sexuality by allowing you to taste it fully and completely, but also at the same time to help you grow to the next level of your development as a man and not intercept your goals, your vision, your purpose in your life. My version of sexuality I'd like to teach you comes as a result of having had a lot of sexuality, but also having this never-ending desire to achieve something important in my life. I don't want to spend all my life with sex and searching for sex and focusing on sex. I also want to make a difference in the world. I want to see myself fully potentiated. I want to be as strong as I can. I don't want to fall apart. I don't want to be engaging in behaviors that expose me to risky people and risky situations. So the kind of sexuality I want to offer to you will have both approaches. The one that has to do with your self-expression of sexuality, and at the same time, one that has to do with the protection, so that you don't let sex get out of hand and become a priority in your life. But instead, you prioritize with your goals, you prioritize with your vision and your purpose. When you prioritize that, and you do this inside of a gay community like Big Gay Family Social Program, then relationships and sexuality will happen on its own without you having to actually make it happen. Because once you are on your path of your authentic self-expression, all the secondary things in your life align towards it. It's like your vision, your purpose, your goals become the attractor that's pulling you towards the future. And that pull ensures that the people that it pulls with it also are aligned with a similar journey, similar vision. And so the sex and the relationships and the intimacy, the emotional connections along those pathways will be very, very different, so much better Then, if otherwise, the attractor that's pulling you towards your future is always sex-based. So the ideas that you're going to learn about in this video about sexuality are going to help you make yourself wholesome again in the context of sex. These ideas are going to help you connect sexuality with love in a way that works. And these ideas are going to set you free from the shame, from the feeling of devaluation, humiliation that's all around us, that for most of us is not even detected anymore. It has been normalized to such a degree that you didn't even know it's there. The ideas I'm going to communicate to you in this video are going to help you transform and transcend the level of low human consciousness that is all around us in the gay world, and to raise yourself to a higher level of consciousness in the way that you perceive yourself and in the way that you perceive other gay men. In fact, that is our job. This is our job, to lift ourselves to a high level of consciousness, interact on that level, and then relationships, love, and sex works beautifully. But because it's not on that level, it's fragmented. And that's why it doesn't work. It's helpful to get a little bit more specific about what makes conversation and learning about sex so complicated. And what makes it complicated, what makes it difficult, is that there are people that enter into the conversation about sex from so many different psychological states that it makes it impossible to figure out what really works. It makes it impossible to discover whether there is a formula, like a recipe for the best sex ever. And yes, there is a recipe. There is a golden standard. Just like we have standards in other places in the world, we have a standard for maximization of the sexual experience. I'll teach you that standard in this video. This standard exists, and this means that there is a certain recipe for a beautiful sexual experience. It's not anybody can do whatever they want to do. And so what makes conversation and learning about sex difficult is that a person at the age of 20 is going to look at sex differently than a person at the age of 40. Also, a person who has emotional deprivation is going to look at sex differently than a person who is emotionally rich and who is surrounded by people like their mother or their father who love them. A man who has no mother and father who love them, his experience of sex, his desire for sex will be different than the desire for sex of a man who has both mom and dad who consistently visit him and support him emotionally. So the sexual energy, all things that relate to sex, are mirrors of our internal incompletions. That's why you see such a variety of desires for sex, such a variety of explanations and justifications about sex, because everybody believes that it's their version of sex that's the best for them. It's because they need that sex to complete something about them that is so unique to them, that this is how we look at the whole landscape of sex. It may seem like it's impossible to figure out what's right or what's wrong. But when you look at it from a developmental perspective, psychological perspective, you quickly see that, okay, this person is emotionally deprived, that's why they seek this crazy sex. Or this person has low self-esteem, that's why they like to be humiliated on a sling. Then you see that other person who has a big penis and he wants to show off to everybody, and to him sex is everything because he gets his status from the size of his penis and he wants to show it off to everybody. So once we look at a lot of the developmental states of human consciousness, of also our psychological development from the moment we are babies until we are 20 or 30, you can quickly see that there's a variation. A perfect example is a gay man who's closeted. His ideas about sexuality, his behaviors about sex, his experiences about sex have not been completely fully open. He is going to have to spend the next 5 years to figure out sex, maybe even 10 years, maybe even for the rest of his life, depending on how much he understands himself and how sex comes together. So across the span of the gay community, we've got a variation that is so huge that there's going to be such high variation of opinions about sex that it seems like it's impossible to figure out what should we do as a gay human being, how do we have sex with one another. And so then also we have the anal intercourse. And when you look at it logically, it doesn't make any sense, but when you look at it psychologically, it is supported by all the humiliation and all the shaming that's invisible, but then projects itself through a behavior called anal mutilation. In reality, that's what it's called. So we can look at all the variation. We can also look at the insecurities people have about sex, about penis sizes, about the way their body looks, their age, all these insecurities all across the board. So when you add all the incompletions on the psychological level, then you add all the insecurities about body image issues. Then on top of that, if you add all the sexual abuse that people have when they are teenagers, now I hope that you see that, holy shit, no wonder we are all devaluing each other through sex and humiliating each other through sex, because most of what we know about sex comes not from order, but from this puzzle of sexual incompletions, insecurities, of hurt and abuse, and on top of that, all of it read by shame and devaluation in the gay world. It's almost impossible to understand all of this. Now, luckily, I've spent the past 12 years in this area seeking the understanding, and I've come to a realization that yes, we can understand all of this. It's not that complicated when we have this big picture understanding. Now we can zoom in and say, okay, what is the kind of sex that works? And I'm going to share with you now the formula that will help you understand where we're going with all of this. So we talked about what makes sex very difficult to understand, or what makes about sex difficult to understand. And we've learned that it's because people come from so many different places in terms of their psychological development, in terms of their insecurities, their fears. To one person, sex is everything. To another person, it's meaningless. Why does it all happen? It happens because we come from different experiences of growing up. And each person was exposed to different something that then in turn created a belief about sex, about body, about love and emotion. And ultimately, we can bring it all together by studying sexuality, studying psychology. In fact, that's why we do study psychology, and we have those formulas. And that's why you're here, to understand how to put it all together into a coherent model. So we're going to use ontology as a way to enter into this conversation about sexuality. And it's helpful to also understand the function and why you crave sex so much, because these are connected. So what is the function of sex? Is there a function to it? And is it why you crave it? And in the gay world, because there's no reproduction, what is really the function of sex? What is the function of touch? So we're gonna begin now the exploration of why is it that you crave sex so much? And why is it that sex is so potent inside you and almost like dominating your life all the time? And we start this exploration by pointing out one of the most important functions of human interactions. I've learned this through the Big Gay Family Social Program, noticing and observing how men are changing and growing. And I've discovered that there is one law of human interaction that is the most important law, and how it translates into sexuality, and how it helps us answer the question, why are we so motivated to have sex, and what is the function of sex? And this law is the law of validation. To discover this law, it sometimes helps to explore the creation of a human AI, artificial intelligence. Because in the creation process of a human AI, you would have to teach that artificial intelligence to recognize itself. How do you recognize yourself is the big question here. And we take it for granted. You look at your hand, you look at this hand, you look at your legs, you look at yourself in the mirror, and here you are. But see, there are a lot of psychological processes that are above and beyond what you can see as yourself. And for those processes to take place, you have to have another human being standing in front of you. and interacting with you. That is what satisfies the law of validation. And obviously, we take this deeper into sexuality. The greatest amount of validation you can ever receive is through human touch. Because human touch is a real experience. It's no longer in your head based on hearing someone talk. It's no longer in your internal state of mind as a result of your emotions. Now it's something that is metaphysical. It's touch. And so because of that, it has the greatest weight in terms of providing you of psychological validation. And that's why sex is so important, because the sexual energy, the motivation of you to be naked with another person has to do with the satisfaction of the law of validation. On a deeply unconscious level inside you, you have to be next to someone naked, they have to touch you, or you have to touch them in order for your existential and psychological needs to be met. And many of these needs you don't feel on a surface level. You don't even know that they're there. The only way that your body communicates to you about them is by exaggerating your arousal or enhancing it or producing a stronger arousal. So you just wake up, you have a hard on, you feel horny, but on the deeply internal part of you, there is this craving for the satisfaction of the existential and psychological needs for you to feel content about yourself, for you to feel like you do exist in this metaphysical world. So because sex is about touching, it's the most important source of your validation of your existence. And there are probably hundreds of thousands of psychological processes that depend on your experience of that human touch. The law of validation is extraordinary, especially the more you study artificial intelligence, the more you study ontology or the science of being, you recognize that there are hundreds of things we take for granted just by opening up our eyes and being able to see the reality around you. You don't ask all the millions of questions that typically you would need to ask to understand why are the things around you happening the way they are happening. Why do you even exist? Why are you even around? Why do you have a mouth? Why do you have a torso? Why do you have two legs? Why do you have two arms? Why do you have a penis? All these things are discovered through validation. All these things are discovered through you touching or another person touching you, having a dialogue about it, and all of it gets integrated into your consciousness. So when you're naked around someone, it's the most potent state of being in the context of validation. So whatever you bring into it or whatever you take away from it is going to have a very strong effect on your consciousness. If you take something from human touch that belongs there, you are ripping apart that experience. Or if you take that human touch and use it for something else, you are corrupting it. And so when we look at sexuality, when we look at the law of validation, we have to enter into the realization that when we talk about sex, we talk about something very serious. We talk about something that has nothing to do with hedonistic or materialistic concepts. It's something that is so inherently connected to our gestalt of our psychic that has to be approached with the most level of seriousness, because it deals with the metaphysical contact of the humanness, the beingness, and the reality around you and other beings. So on an existential ontological level, human touch is the most serious thing about our existence. There's nothing more serious than human touch. And you will always crave it because of how it is so necessary for your discovery of how you are, where you begin, where you end, how you are in the context of the meaning of this world. All of it will be unconsciously processed as you're interacting on a sexual level through human touch with another person over the course of your life. It's like sexuality is the proxy through which we experience each other and the world around us. And the more proper the sex is, the more proper the human touch is, the more rich your experience of yourself, the other person, and existence on this earth. So we start right here with the definition for healthy sex. We're going to use these as axioms. Axioms are terms that are no longer questioned, no longer broken down into subcomponents. So we are going to introduce these principles as axiomatic principles that we ask that you never question. If you question this, then you are fragmenting sexuality. You no longer are experiencing wholesome sexuality, you are fragmenting it. So the number one principle about sexuality is that you take the body as a prerequisite. So the primacy of the body is the principle, the number one law of healthy sexuality, the primacy of the body. In other words, that the body, your concern for the body takes precedence over any sexual experience, any experience of the touch. So if human touch causes the body to hurt, you don't do it in any shape or form, regardless of what anybody says. If you touch the body anywhere, produces hurt, produces stretching or tearing, or produces deformation or mutilation, that is no longer proper sex, because it then attacks the very thing that you need to experience sex. You see? You can't experience sex without the body. So the more you hurt the body, the less you experience the sex that you want to have, right? So the primacy of the body means that sex, whatever kind of sex that you have, can never violate the laws of physiology and the shape of your body. And we can put a condition upon that, is that the body has to return to its wholeness after sex, say within 10 minutes or 20 minutes after sex. You have to feel whole and completed without any pain. So when we talk about anal sex, for example, the day after, if you go to the bathroom and your ass hurts in the toilet as you are, emptying yourself, then that means that you did not have sex, because your body is now experiencing hurt a day after or 2 days after. And it happens all the time whenever you get fogged by big penises. So let's just be honest about it. So by that definition, that kind of sexuality is no longer healthy sexuality, because it violates the primacy of the body. The body cannot be hurt, period. And there's so many books about trauma. One of those books is Body Always Remembers. The body always remembers. So your mind, especially in situations of sexual abuse, especially in situations in childhood of any kind of abuse, your mind enters into trauma and is then turned off. That situation is no longer remembered, but the body remembers. So you can confuse yourself as much as you want, but the body will always remember that, hey, you are mutilating me, you are stretching me, you are causing me to no longer return to the original state. So that is no longer something good for me. And the body will store that humiliation. The body will store that shame in your physical organs, contributing to disease. So read the book, Body Always Remembers. I think Body Always Knows. Look it up and you will understand those principles. So the primacy of the body. Always remembers this. Always remember this. Now I come from personal training. I've been into bodybuilding in my 20s. I was very athletic all of my life. I was into running, into table tennis, into ground tennis, the real tennis, and I was into all kinds of sports, basketball, soccer, judo, karate, and running, and now I do mountain hiking and climbing. So it's helpful to know this, because people that are in association with the body, to them this principle is like self-evidency. To me, it's self-evident. I don't want my body to be stretched or to be ruined, because I want to go do those athletic things out there, and I need my body to be at my best. So for example, for 2022, I'm planning for the summer of 2022, I'm planning to hike Pikes Peak and Mount Princeton. These are tall mountains, and I have to have my body completely functioning. I can't have any pain or ache. And so my sexuality, the sexual experiences I have in relationship to my body, they will be different. I'm not going to violate my body. Now, I will still have sexual fantasies, getting fucked on slings and, by people. I still have those fantasies. So these fantasies, it's a different discussion. There's a reason why these fantasies are there. It has to do with social conditioning, has to do with all the images that you've been exposed to, all the decades of gay propaganda. So you have those fantasies, and I still have those fantasies about anal sex, getting fucked, and the rest of it. I still have that. So I'm not denying them, but also there is my body here. I actually do have a body. You also have a physical body. So there are your fantasies, and there's the body. So the body is because you're in it. It has to be taken care of as the priority. You can't experience sex without the body, and you're going to be getting older, so the body takes priority, always. Pinching, piercings, all weird things in sex, unacceptable anymore. Anything that distorts, hurts, stretches the body, unacceptable. Period. Unacceptable. It's helpful to look at it this way, because what this will do is this will stop all the BDSM and all the devaluation, all the sexual violence, all the sadomasochistic patterns will immediately cease to exist. When you put the body on the number one level, the body always remembers. The body always knows. You don't want to fuck with the body, okay? So on the physical level, also on a spiritual level, the body is the only body you were given. Why would you want to hurt it? Why would you want to be on a sling, getting fucked and fisted and dildos? Why would you want to have all the abuse, all the big dicks stretching your ass and it hurts, and then you have to get fucked because you got fucked already, so you might as well continue? You don't have to experience any of this. These are unhealthy states of mind. These are very unhealthy states of mind. You may not know that because this has been normalized, but just because it has been normalized does not mean it doesn't hurt you. It's like, a lot of people are overweight today, and everybody's over, nobody cares about it anymore. The same thing here. Sexual health is like, nobody cares. Just like with food, nobody cares. A lot of people are overweight. A lot of people are sexually mistreating each other. So it has been normalized. So you have to know that. Just because everybody's doing it does not make it right. You do understand that, don't you? Like with anal intercourse, just because everybody's doing it does not mean you have to have a cauliflower ass. So this conversation is important for you to have. The body is all you've got, really, is all you've got. And thank God to my father, he taught me that. That's one of the things that I'm grateful for with my family. My father, my mother, they were both into athletics, and I had lessons. I was always out there on teams and putting myself out there. Lots of group sports activities, running into other men, physical contact with team sports. And so you learn that the body is like your temple. You can't fuck up your body with any sex, any kind of sex that stretches your anus or stretches your body, piercings, dildos, any toys. It's straight up sadomasochism. I'm even willing to say a lot of it is psychopathy, and for sure, most of it is narcissistic behavior. So learn about all of that, and you'll be like, holy shit, in most of the gay sexual interactions, it's psychopathy, it's that's the BDSM, leather, some of the bears get into it too, all the tattoos, coverings, and all the hardcore looks and the leather looks. That's all inability to process emotion. That's all it is. They can't process emotion, and so they have to create another bubble, and they create a world, and they attach all the symbolism of leather to the world, making it look like it's super masculine. No, in reality, these men are narcissistic, psychopathic, sociopathic. They are lacking fundamental aspects of human development. And that's why they need to create these worlds of leather and BDSM, because otherwise they can't express themselves. So you learn about all of that, and you look at the body that, okay, the body always has to be the number one. And everybody who violates the body is not healthy. And you don't want to be around them naked. You don't, ever, ever. Not even once. One strange sexual behavior, one strange sexual experience can become like a fork in the road for you with your sexual development. One wrong person will introduce you to something like fisting or sex and drugs or sex on slings, and in a group that can set into motion a domino that for decades you become a person you otherwise would have never thought you would become. So now let's talk about the second principle, which is the presence of emotion. The presence of emotion, right? For an experience between humans to be a human experience, it probably has to include emotion, right? Otherwise, what kind of experience is it? And then if we remove emotion from sexuality, then we also want to ask, then what are we doing? Why would we want to have emotionless physical contact with each other? So there's a certain level of humiliation, certain level of self-shaming and shaming others embedded in that kind of formula where we give ourselves permission to have sex without emotion. There should be no experience between humans without the presence of emotion when it comes to something as important as physical touch and physical contact. If there's no emotion, it means that the emotion cannot protect you from some risky experience. That if you had your emotions turned on, you would have noticed, no, I don't have an emotion with this person, I probably shouldn't get involved. So if we remove emotions altogether, all of a sudden you keep getting involved with people that you shouldn't be getting involved to begin with. So you're breaking the law of a lot of things that are part of this thing called trust, community, human interactions. If you don't want emotion there, you are going to be entering into a world where you no longer have a certain ability to protect yourself, to discover what's going on, and that's your emotional, intuitive, inside of you kind of ability that's there, that you're supposed to bring to the surface, not suppress. And this has to do with the gay shame, the devaluation that's embedded in how we perceive ourselves. Because we are gay, because you're gay, you perhaps have programmed yourself not to ever awaken emotionally to another man because you think it's wrong, because of the devaluation and the shaming and the humiliation. I know some of these things might sound like, oh no, this is not happening to me. You can't feel those emotions directly. These are emotions that are kind of like outcomes of trauma, and they are compartmentalized in your psychic in a way that you can't feel them directly. That's how we are designed. Some emotions that are inside of us, we can't feel directly, but it doesn't mean they're there. It just means that like you take a pill and your pain goes away. Our minds, our psychic is made in such a way that you can't directly feel shame, devaluation and humiliation and guilt. These emotions are very difficult for you to feel. And so when it's happening, you don't even know it's there. So it's important to take this very seriously so that you don't trivialize emotions as important ingredients, not only for you, but also in the context of sexuality. When sex is done right, it respects the body of both partners, and also it is surrounded by emotions. There has to be some emotion there. And of course, if you have a negative emotion, that means you should not be involved at all. So positive emotion is necessary for the sexual experience to take place. And to develop the positive emotion, it will take some time, and so that's why it's there. It actually is the protection against no strings attached sex, because we're not supposed to have it, because it goes against our nature. It actually humiliates us. No strings attached sex, all of that from hookup apps and the hookup culture, it's straight up humiliation, devaluation, shaming, and leads to internalized guilt. Because none of us should be doing this activity, hooking up right and left, using each other for sex, treating each other like dirt. We don't feel the humiliation because we are in a state of mind of arousal that then prevents those sensations to be present. But sometimes when you're really relaxed, when you listen to soft music and you are sentimental, kind of like in a state of melancholy, then you realize, oh my gosh, that's not how I want to be. You say to yourself, I don't want to be mutilated. I don't want to be exposed to all the trashy sexual experiences. And in that state of mind, you can feel the shame. You can feel like you are losing your sense of self. But when you're aroused, the state of arousal makes it impossible to feel humiliation, to feel guilt, and feel shame. And that's why everybody participates in those activities without knowing that they're actually self-destructing. But because they are incapable of sensing those destructive emotions, because arousal takes over, they lose their protection from self-destruction. In fact, this is the recipe for destroying our lives through sex and through shame and devaluation. It always happens with sex because arousal is like, you know how everybody fantasizes to have some technology where you disappear? Like you can walk around and you disappear, you press a button and nobody can see you. Well, with sex, arousal does that. Arousal is like taking a pill and all other emotions disappear. You can't feel anything. You only feel the arousal. When you're horny, that arousal. Sometimes, especially if you hook up on Grindr, you can be in a state of arousal for days, for months sometimes. And so you can feel the humiliation, the guilt, the shame that's happening all around you. So this is real and this is serious stuff. This is all psychology. If you're shamed, the body remembers. All the internal unconscious processes will remember and record everything. Just because consciously you can't feel it, just because consciously you can't perceive it, it doesn't mean it's not happening. It doesn't mean it's not happening. Okay, so number one principle is body primacy, primacy of the body. Number two is presence of emotion. Emotions is your protection. Emotions is something that's happening to you all the time. You can't make it go away, and you don't want to make it. Why would you want to make it go away? You don't want to make it go away, and you don't want to suppress it. If anything, your job on this planet is to learn how to master your emotional expressions, learn how to master the understanding of your emotions, and to actually act out your emotions properly. You want emotions to be there because that's the glue between human beings. So emotions have to be there. And now the third principle for healthy sexuality, and that's the context of caring. This simplifies the entire conversation about how to find healthy sex because it forces you to only have sex with people that you know care about you. And this is really important. You have to have a demonstration of care prior to allowing yourself to have sex with that person. So altogether, the primacy of the body, the presence of emotion, and the context of care, these three principles will allow you to have healthy sex and will help you choose the kind of sexual exploration that can be detrimental to your mental health and to your future. And now we're going to be able to talk about the specifics of how to have that kind of sex with specific guidance for when to have sex, how to actually do it, and how to explore sexuality from the ontological perspective, which is what I've been communicating to you over the past several days. And there's one more topic that we need to cover to complete this discussion about sexuality here, and that's the discussion about the future of sex. And I have really bad news for you. The future of sex looks pretty scary. I recently found out that there's this website that people are using to stream themselves naked, and they can perform all kinds of sex acts for a few tokens. And so everybody who has designer genitalia, anybody who is well endowed, can go on that website, stream themselves from their bedroom, and they earn extra tokens. And I think this is going to be the future. People that gay men that have been well endowed or who have the designer genitalia, they are not going to be offering you a hookup sex. They are going to be only selling themselves for sex on those streaming video websites where someone from wherever can pay them a few tokens, and they can get that person to stick a dildo up their ass, to do some kind of sex act, to jerk off. And I'm noticing that more and more of these websites, kind of like OnlyFans, where people are prostituting themselves for money, that is myself the future of sex. totally commoditized sexuality. Everyone who is well endowed, everyone who's beautiful, is going to have a profile on Match.com looking for love, and then a profile on OnlyFans, one of those streaming websites, where he earns $20 for each jerk-off session. Or every time he gets fucked online and streams that, he earns $100. And people are going to be making money like that. With the economy going where it's going in the world, you can only foresee the acceleration of the commoditization of sexuality, so that people earn money from their bodies, basically. And you will see prostitution just getting more and more rampant. I think that's the future of sex. Sexual compatibility also will be out the window. We are seeing sexual arousal and sexual variation on such a level where creating sexual compatibility is going to be literally impossible, or is impossible to such a degree that you can maintain it for a long time, because of such a high level of variation, desires, and all of that change in the world of sexuality that's happening at record pace right now. So the future of sex is that if you are guided by sex, it's going to be a lose-lose game. That's one of the motivations for me to talk to you about all the things sexual, because if you're guided by sex, you are going to be lured into a world where you're going to be interacting with people that sell themselves online, who have profiles on streaming video sites, that sell themselves for $10 per jerk-off session. And these are the kind of men that will be contaminating the world of hookup apps, especially the world of these free services out there where people are meeting without any scrutiny, without any due diligence about who these people are on a psychological level. So if you're guided by sex right now, and if sex is like your big thing, just get ready for the kind of world where you might get some kind of sex, but it will only be sex for pay. So if you want that sexual compatibility, when someone notices that they are so good for you sexually, they're gonna say, hey, listen, you gotta pay me money now. Because I'm not gonna do it for free for you. If I can do it on a streaming website for money, why would I want to do it for you for free? They're not gonna have sex with you for free if they can now do it on a streaming video site. It's like they're gonna lose their cum for free for you, while they can come for $20 on a streaming website, or maybe depending what kind of kinky stuff they get into. If they get fucked online and it's streamed and it's some guy with a big dick fucking another decent looking bottom, well, they're gonna get paid maybe $300. And so imagine dating someone who then tells you later that he does these streaming services on the side as his job. What do you do now? Do you stop dating him? Or do you continue dating him knowing that he's fucking guys and getting paid for it? And telling you, this is the job he does and he has to have money to pay his bills. What would you do in that situation? That's gonna happen more and more and more, especially with the beautiful guys who can find a job, and they ultimately will be presented with, hey, am I gonna drive for Uber, or am I gonna be jerking off on one of those streaming video platforms? Am I gonna have a profile on OnlyFans and sell subscription for $20 a month? Would you date someone who has an OnlyFans prostitution profile, who's prostituting himself online? Would you date somebody like that? So in the future, I predict that all sexual activities, all sexual fantasies will lead to the necessity to pay for them. So paid sex is going to skyrocket and dominate. People are no longer going to be having sex with you from Grindr for free. So the entire concept of a free hookup, I think that's going to go out the window. Sex will become very complicated on those platforms. A lot of people are going to be exposing themselves to a lot of risk by basically paying for sex and then getting into that whole world of sex and pay for sex, gambling, and all the weird sex that is in that kind of world. And knowing about this, Knowing that it's coming, it's helpful because you can retrain yourself psychologically and you can recognize that you got to be guided by love right now. You cannot be guided by sex. That world is never going to make you happy. It's going to be a more dangerous, a more risky world for the rest of your life. And there's nothing you can do about this because people are losing their jobs and they have to pay their bills. And if they have a big penis and big balls and a beautiful body, they will probably create an account on OnlyFans and have $300 subscription when they have some super humiliation sex, some super heavy duty humiliation. They'll probably get paid $500 for that on a given day. And so that is my friends, the world that is in front of us. So those of you who are hoping that you're gonna have an amazing lover with designer genitalia and a beautiful body, and he's gonna fuck you for free and be with you for free, it's very unlikely to happen that way. He's going to have an account on OnlyFans for $25 a month subscription. He will probably be streaming himself naked, fucking others, or having sexual adventures with others for $300 a day. And if you want to compete with that, well, you're going to have to pay more. It's not going to be free. That's the future that's in front of all of us who are slaves to all the people out there with genitalia, designer genitalia, and big penises. If you're into that kind of thing, you will definitely have to pay. It's not going to be free, and you're going to be sentencing yourself to a possibility that all the guys you're chasing have profiles on pornographic websites and they are prostituting themselves for money. So altogether, where we're going with the discussion is to show you, if you try to make love work in the sex world, it will never work. Ultimately, you will have to leave the world of sex completely behind. I'm not saying that you should not have sex. What I'm saying is that you should not live through the world of sex, the one that's coming, that is described to you. You should still have sex, but sex in the world of love. Do you see the difference? The world of love, and then the sex that comes into it. And in the world of sex, it will be impossible to bring love into it, because that world of sex is going to be so crazy as shit crazy that it's going to be impossible to make anything normal work in that world. I'm even willing to say that it's even better if you go against some of your habituated sexual arousal and go with someone you may not have a strong attraction towards to protect yourself from that world of sex and to actually have a healthy human interaction and then open up as time passes by. That's better for you than acting out of sexual arousal that you habituated into and then always be in the world of sex with all the wrong people that have profiles on hookup apps, that have profiles on sex prostitution ring apps, such as the streaming video platforms where people are basically in cubicles and they're posing naked and you pay them tokens and they jerk off for you and they have sex with you online via video, or the profile on onlyfans.com. So you want to protect yourself from that world. Anybody who is prostituting themselves, they're humiliating themselves. That's what it is. Any porno star out there, you're humiliating yourself. Just because you can feel it doesn't mean that that's not what's happening. One day you're going to have to pay the price for that. And that price is that your life, that one day will be so filled with poverty and things that are going wrong, that that's ultimately the price you're going to have to pay for humiliation, because humiliation is taking out your strength. Humiliation is taking away your human gifts and talents that can take you to the next level. Everything that has to do with shaming and humiliation through sex is taking your power away. And so that's why I'm so strong about my message about having sex and doing it the right way and in a functional way. Because otherwise, the journey ends up in poverty. The journey ends up in losing things, not gaining things. You'll be losing things. Sometimes it takes 10 years, sometimes it's 2 years, depending on how volatile the kind of sex that you are into is and the people that it attracts. So what I'm sharing here with you are ideas that, when put together, can give you an understanding of sex and the solutions to your sexual needs that are so much healthier, so much more productive. So stay with me as we continue on this journey of exploration. Now we are ready to enter into the discussion about how actually to have the kind of sex that works, that respects the body, that brings in emotion, and that is allowing you to feel and experience the concern of another person. And that, my friends, is the best sex ever. If you have this kind of sex across the span of days and months and years, this kind of sex takes you higher, brings you together, validates you, give you all the needs met on your deepest levels that we might not even have a chance to explore. That kind of sex is going to transform your life. So let's talk about it, and let's enter this discussion with the understanding of the functionality for sex. What is the function of sex? Function of sex is, number one, reproduction, but that doesn't happen for gay people, so we can eliminate that right away. Number two is the validation. We talked about it earlier. Sex is supposed to validate you. And the third benefit and the function of sex is to connect the body with the spirit, the body with the beingness that's inside the body. In fact, the philosophical aspect of sexuality is the unity of the internal spirit that's inside the body and the body itself. But because the spirit cannot identify with the body that it's in through validation, it has to experience it from another person. So that's why we need to have another person to actually create a connection of the spirit with the body. So that is the function of sex. It's not just for reproduction, it's also for psychological need of validation and thousands of mechanisms that are dependent on it, and also the merge of beingness with the body. A philosophical, existential, spiritual perspective, also very healing perspective to the body. So this is the function of sex. And so when we talk about creating the best sex ever, we want to connect to those functions. We want to allow those functions to take place properly. If those functions don't take place, it means we're not really having the best sex ever. We're just having fragmented sex. So let's now talk about the specifics. We're talking about here a different version of sexuality, a version of sexuality that's not about getting off. It's not about just having sex and then walking away. It's not about a partial experience of sensuality and intimacy. It's about an extended and wholesome experience of emotion, intimacy, and of your body, or through your body. So right off the bat, this sexual experience is going to take place multiple days, not in a sequence, and not obviously continuously, but across the span of month or 30 days, you would come into contact with another person on 3 or 4 occasions, once a week, and then you would then act out the sexuality that we're talking about here right now. So on the first day, it would be one experience. Then a week after that, another experience, and the week after that, another experience, and the week after that, another experience. 3 to 4 moments when you're together, close to one another, and then as a result of all of that, you experience a sexual something that not only produces release of all the things that need to be released, but satisfaction on all levels where you seek satisfaction. This is what I call the wholesome sex, ontological sex, sex that satisfies all of you. You could even argue this is like maximization of the sexual potential by experiencing human touch and human contact in such rich context that all of you becomes alive. There's nothing left to decide, and there is no fragmentation at all. So we can call this like designer sex. Designer sex, meaning we are designing a sexual experience, we're dividing it into multiple days, we are extending the time frame where this physical contact will be contained in. It's not just one day, it's 30 days or more, and that there is a progressive increase of sensuality. So you don't immediately get naked and get off. No, it's a progressive addition of sensuality, or I call this management, sensory management. So there's sensory management. You don't just enter into each other's bodies, lay naked next to one another. You start with some sensuality, kind of like a nap, or you lay next to one another, fully dressed. And so that's one Saturday. And then an hour later or a couple hours later, you then talk about it, maybe you have a meal, and then you go home. Then a week later, you come in again, and now as opposed to a nap or just laying next to one another, this time maybe you lay next to one another and you have a hand on his shoulder, on his chest, or you maybe hold hands and you talk next to one another. You are in the bed and you dressed in a pajama or in some kind of clothing, something light, something comfortable, but you're not naked. You're still not naked. Then on the third occasion, so another week passes by, you come in and now you're taking off your upper clothes. So you take off something from the chest. So now you expose your chest. And then you do the whole thing again, and then you wait another week, and only if you felt that there was erection from the other person, then you progress and then you fully nude. So you see, it's a progressive addition of sensuality. It's not all at once. The goal is not to have an orgasm. The goal is to come close and merge emotion, intimacy, sensuality, and the physical body. In the process, trusting that when we slow it down, there will be tremendous amount of healing and transformation. I can assure you that the amount of things that will be happening here on a psychological level is going to be so insanely rich, so insanely beautiful and meaningful, that if you ever do this kind of sex, you will never go back to the volatile intercourse. You will never want to be humiliated ever again, and you will notice the opposite of humiliation. You will for the first time notice sexual ascension. You will actually notice feelings you've never felt before, because we are not rushing the physical contact. We are not introducing devaluation. We are introducing high-level validation, and across the span of multiple days, slowing it down, expanding it, providing opportunity for dialogue, for emotion, for intimacy, and progressively adding sensuality. From first a nap, energetic comfort, you are allowing yourself to be energetically comfortable, like in the presence of the other person, fully clothed, and there's still distance between you, but short distance. Then we add touch with clothes on. Then we add touch and then stripping upper clothes. And then if there is erection, if there's arousal, only then we progress and then fully naked. And we're not going into intercourse. We then another week after that, then we repeat until a new form of release you and he can create together. And so there is a certain customization that's possible to this after you know that there's arousal. If you notice that there's no erection, then you know you don't want to take it to the next level. You continue to stay on that level of senses where when we need to produce the arousal, the erection, and that is upper body off but lower body covered, and you are close to one another, touching each other, having conversation, and maybe a soft massage, and just gentle presence of one person next to one another. And if you can't produce erection, that means there is some healing has to happen. And that's why we want to pause here and repeat this until there is erection. If you can't have erection with just upper body closed, then it means there has to be sharing about what's happening. Usually you are attracted to the person, but there's no erection. It's because there's certain sexual expectation that's coming in. You want to be fucked, you want to fuck him, you want to be in control, or you want to be controlled. You want him to humiliate you. You want to humiliate him. You want to do some strange thing that you're used to doing, but you can't do it. So you will feel off. And that's why this moment is an important moment where you continue the next time around and you are undressed halfway, so you only waist up is undressed, and you wait it out. You talk about what's happening. What do you want from me that I'm not giving you? You tell this person, hey, I want to be fucked, but now we're just supposed to be still. I can't feel hard because you're not fucking me. Or whatever has to be said needs to be said. And that's intimacy. It doesn't mean you're going to do all of this. It just means you have to share those expectations that are not there. You have to share all the conditioning. Or you want to share, you don't have to. You want to share it. You want to tell the other person, hey, listen, the reason why I'm not getting hard is because I'm used to all the, leaving the door open and waiting with ass up and face down. And now I'm next to you and I'm completely confused because I'm waiting something that has volatility in it, and now there is no volatility and I feel confused. I can't be aroused without volatility. And like, whoa, all kinds of deeper layers of intimacy are possible. You're recognizing that you are used to very volatile sex and you can't have a hard-on when there is a naked or half-naked person that you're attracted to next to you. And so once you have an erection, then we know we have a proof. But when both people have erection, that okay, now this is, you are ready for the next level. And so then we enter to the next level, you're fully naked, and then you introduce oral sex, and then you introduce orgasm. And that is, my friends, the journey that I'm inviting you to make with sexuality. Sexuality that has to do with management of your senses, introducing sensuality a little bit at the time, and opening up the door to the place in your sexuality where you feel there is something going on there. There's shame, humiliation, hurt, pain, confusion. You don't know how to react. And because you don't have to do anything, you can feel through that space without being confused by it. And you can allow that energy to leave your body and then produce erection in a situation where otherwise you would not produce it. And that's why this form of progressive increasing of sensuality gives that layering where you can find yourself sexually again. You don't need sexual compatibility for this. There's nothing here about top and bottom. There's nothing here about you being in control or he being submissive. This is all about starting from the bottom line scratch. You start from nothing and then you progressively build it up. First, fully clothed, in a nap, then after the nap, then you do just touch, gentle touch, then on another time, you have the upper body naked, and then lower body the next time, if there's arousal, then we add oral sex, and then we add massage and orgasm, and then we have completion of the sexual coming together. I'm simplifying something that you will find to be so transformative, something that is so rich, where things are going to happen that are going to make you cry in those series of experiences, because you're going to actually feel things for the first time in your life that you haven't felt. You're going to feel the almost like the energy of the other person's beingness right next to you. You're going to be able to enter into more advanced states where you close your eyes with this person laying next to you and you're able to merge together on a level of that light body, the body of light. We have an emotional body, we have the physical body, we have the body of the light. And you can come together to the body of the light. This is like the basis for telepathy, the basis for empathy. This is the basis for enhancing and awakening all parts of your intuitive machinery. That when you close your eyes, and when you're with this person, naked, after having had these progressive introduction of sensuality, you feel so safe together. You feel so trusting together. You're going to experience disappearance of form, an entry into the beingness of one another. All things that relate to sexual compatibility will go out the window. All things that you've always heard about top and bottom go out the window immediately. You realize that this is the first time in your life that you've experienced sexuality that ascends you. Sexuality that takes you higher, that takes you into the real depth of each other's beingness. And everything else up until that moment was just a game. It was just a game of ignorance. Attempts to have physical contact, but just confronted with reality that it doesn't work, that it doesn't bring you closer. It actually separates you from the other person. So the ontological sexuality here is the form of sexuality that is in actuality bringing you closer to the other person via emotion, intimacy, and physical contact without hurting, without shaming, without devaluing, without humiliating, without causing guilt, without causing trauma. This is, my friends, the perfect sex that you can ever have. All the things that you've heard about tantric sex, all the hundreds of positions that you've heard about from all these different cultures, don't pay attention to that. They are distractions. They are distractions. So in this video, my friends, we are celebrating the arrival of ontological sexuality into the gay world, our ability to come together without having to experience volatile sexuality, and instead to experience each other in a gentle, in a loving, kind, and futuristic kind of way. In my previous video, I shared with you that I'm going to teach you how to have the kind of sex that aliens would have on spaceships. And there was a person that replied in a comment, which I thought was really funny. And he says, "What do you mean? We're going to learn how to have the kind of sex that aliens have?" And so now I'm going to answer this question. We are learning here about the kind of sex that advanced human beings would have. So when we talk about aliens or beings from other planets, other dimensions, we are assuming that they have a certain intelligence, a certain advanced intelligence as part of their beingness. And so advanced human beings have sexuality and physical contact embraced in an intellectually powerful way. Right now, when we look at our world today, all the sex that we have, it's very high school level sex or grammar, or it's very low level consciousness sex. Let's just put it that way. Aliens and beings from other planets would have higher level consciousness sex, physical contact that actually causes something that is on the level of telepathy, on the level of raising consciousness. It's kind of like celebrating and ritualizing sexuality such that it has some kind of cognitive, psychological, emotional benefit immediately. As a side note, let me share with you something I've never shared with anybody else before, and something I've seen with my own very eyes. I noticed that every time I have this kind of sex that I described to you, and then I go and look in the mirror at myself, I swear to God, I look 5 to 10 years younger almost immediately. My skin gets really nice and soft. It gets really nice and clean. I've noticed this in almost every single case. When I am practicing this kind of sensuality, this kind of sexual contact, there's something about the body. There's something that it beautifies your body. It makes you look younger. And I think it's because there is some exchange of chemistry, something invisible that's happening when two bodies are relaxed, when they're next to one another naked, in a loving way, without agendas. I believe that there's some kind of powerful healing and beautification that's happening. Because I'm telling you guys, I've actually noticed that difference when I would look tired, then I had this kind of sex, and that evening I look at the mirror, I'm like, holy shit, what happened? Did I take some kind of supplement? No, it was that kind of sex. It was being naked next to someone for a couple hours, and then having a dialogue, having touch, that sensuality. And then after that, you look in the mirror and you're like, wow, I'm 20 years younger. So there is something to be said about that proper form of validation of your psychology, of your beingness. I do believe that it has healing properties and beautification properties because it lets go of the stress. It helps you let go of the neurotic energy, helps you let go of tremendous frustrations that have to do with the feeling of loneliness and feeling alone. This form of sexuality removes the drama, the depression, the anxiety that have to do with the feeling of alone or like nobody cares about you. because that form of sexuality has caring embedded in it. That's why you feel so supported. That's why you feel so rejuvenated. That's why you feel so wholesome when you experience sex this way. This is like coming home psychologically. When you are together with another human being, you're celebrating your togetherness without violating each other, without hurting each other, without exposing each other to inappropriate behaviors. There is 100% respect there. There's 100% respect on the level of divinity. There is a respect for the body, for emotions, for intimacy. There's dialogue. And then, yes, there is nudity. And so everything is there. And it's beautiful. There's one final aspect of gay sexuality that we want to understand. And it's the connection of sexuality to gay identity. And this topic can be very deep. I'm going to simplify this for you. I'm going to make this discussion very short. We're going to talk about what does it mean to be gay? What is gayness? And then how do we connect it to the ontological sexuality we described earlier today? How do we connect the two together? So what does it mean to be gay? Have you ever asked yourself the question, what does it mean to be gay? What does it mean that you're a gay man? And how does it connect to sexuality? So I'd like to share with you some ideas that will help you in this understanding of yourself. And these ideas are ideas you will never hear anybody else talk about it, because these ideas require higher level consciousness. These ideas require the curiosity that leads you to a certain understanding that requires time and that requires purity of consciousness. In order for us to do this merge of sexuality and gay identity, I have to ask you to remove everything that you know about sex, to let go of everything that you believe about yourself as a gay man, to let go completely of all of that, because otherwise this won't work. You have to remove all beliefs, all ideas that you've ever heard all your life about what it means to be gay and the purpose of gay sexuality. And now we can enter into a fresh, clean slate, and we can talk about what it means to be gay. I'm going to share with you in a very short amount of time what I believe it means to be gay. The first thing that we need to understand about gayness is that it's not about sex. You're gay not because you want to have sex with another man. That's not why you're gay. You are gay because you want to be with another human being that is the same as you. That is the foundation for understanding of gay beingness, is the attraction that you have towards someone who's of the same gender. That is what it means to be gay. You're attracted to another man, and that attraction is called being gay. Anal intercourse and all the things that have to do with anal, that has nothing to do with gay. It's just is one of those behaviors that is there because we don't have a vagina, we don't have a woman to fuck, so men fuck each other. And that's the only reason why anal sex kind of like attached itself to the definition of, or the earlier definition of what it means to be gay. But gayness has nothing to do with the intercourse. Gayness has nothing to do with fucking. Gayness has everything to do with the fact that you're attracted to sameness. So gayness is attraction to sameness. That's the bottom line of being gay. Sex is just on the side there, but your gayness has nothing to do with sex. Your gayness is your attraction to another being who is the same gender as you. And in our situation, men are attracted to men. Whether you have anal sex or no anal sex with that person doesn't change whether you're gay or not. Okay? So most people make the mistake that they think that anal sex, it means that you're gay. No, you are gay, you're a gay man because you have an internal motivation that is supported by your arousal. So your biology seeks the presence of another being that is the same gender. That is the basis for gayness. Okay? There is a bonus that's part of being gay that nobody takes advantage of. Gay human beings, or gay men, have an extra capacity for validation because of the presence of another man of the same gender. Okay? I know I'm repeating myself, but the details are important here. Okay? So because there is no separation of gender, there is an advantage. I call this the gay genius. And I almost wrote a book about this. I actually created a journal called The Gay Genius, where I teach myself how to benefit from this. So there is a benefit of being gay, and this benefit manifests itself through the ability for higher level validation of your life, of who you are. When you surround yourself with gay men who respect you, who not objectify you via sex or humiliate you, but instead who validate you. Because we have two men, these two men can understand each other faster, can understand each other's motivations faster. And if we were to compare that to a woman trying to understand a man versus man trying to understand another man, a gay man, will understand another gay man a million times faster. In fact, a woman has no ability to understand a man the way that a gay man will understand another gay man. So this gayness thing here has an advantage, has a bonus in it, which is your ability to feel and experience things that only gay men can experience. Straight men and straight women cannot experience this layer. Do you understand the significance of this? I'm still shocked that straight people cannot acknowledge this and recognize that homosexuality and their gay presence has a lot more depth to it than they assume that there is. So we have this extra ability to validate one another, to understand one another. We can do things together faster, technically speaking, when we remove the shame, the humiliation, and all the toxic behaviors. So gayness gives you an extra ability, something that it can make your life better, make you happier, give you access to experiences that straight people can only dream about and fantasize about. It's like a gay living being can be activated through the mechanisms of validation a lot deeper, a lot faster, and on a much greater level. I think there's extraordinary opportunity in experiencing that for yourself. I've experienced that for myself, and that's why I don't crave the anal sex the way I used to crave it. I don't crave all the toxicity, all the nonsensical behaviors anymore, because I've discovered that there is part to me that is extremely unique, that if I don't take advantage of it, I'll just live this life without taking advantage of it, of this extra beautiful thing that I was given. Imagine one day figuring out that there is some kind of hidden magic inside of a gay identity, inside of the sameness attraction. Remove the word gay, introduce sameness. Maybe there's some kind of gift. Maybe there's some kind of ability that becomes available when the sameness attraction creates a collective of men coming together, experiencing each other without shaming, without humiliation, but instead lifting each other, because they provide the validation to one another in a much more comprehensive way, because they understand each other. So all of this is connecting. Your ability to understand a person depends on whether they are your gender or opposing gender. If you try to understand someone who has a different gender, it will be very difficult. If you try to understand someone who is of your own gender, it will be a lot easier. And so that's the root of the advantage of the gay genius. Now, I'm willing to take this further. When we talk about anal intercourse and remove it from the gay beingness, which I believe should be removed, the proper gay, or what I call canonical gay, does not include anal intercourse. It's no longer there. Okay, so let's take this further. Assume that there is a world of gay men without anal intercourse. What will be immediately available? You will notice that immediately there will be no insertion and no devaluation. There will be no sadomasochistic patterns. There will be no humiliation. There will be no control and power dynamics in sex, in touching, in interactions, when anal intercourse is completely removed. And I think that when that is removed, and those gay men are still left over, willing to experience themselves and their gay life, these people will experience something that the ancient Egyptians experienced, something that only monks in faraway places that have access to sophisticated techniques can experience. I believe that this gay genius, the hidden treasure of being gay, is manifested through something that happens when we let go of the necessity to insert ourselves into each other's bodies. If instead we recognize that we are no longer part of that theme of insertion, and then respect each other without having to insert into one another. What this does, it immediately removes the sadomasochistic patterns that typically are around heterosexual sex and are brought into the gay sex as well. So this, by its presence, removes all the bad, all the toxic, all the dysfunctional sex that otherwise would be all around us, distracting us from ascension, from fulfillment, from happiness, my friends. Happiness. So this ontological understanding of sexuality, removing the gay intercourse and discovering what sameness attraction is about, is all part of this discussion that helps you understand the role of sex in your life. And if you're a gay man, you want to act out your gayness in a proper way. You don't want sex to intercept it. And your gayness gets expressed through the greater level of emphasis on the mental activity and the emotional activity with other people, other gay men. So because of the absence of the intercourse, we will need to compensate for that. I believe that gay presence is not a final product. We are not a final product in the evolutionary development of humanity. As a gay beings, we are an in-between form of life, simply because of how the presence of penises and the inability to have vaginal intercourse. We don't have vaginas, we have penises, we will continue to fuck each other, but we can't just fuck asses. Asses were not meant to be fucked. So then what do? And the whole shift of that insertion-based mechanism of sexual behavior into non-intercourse, non-insertion-based, that ultimately can be very difficult for people to do because of the presence of penises and the social conditioned desires for intercourse, which are completely socially conditioned. But yet, we cannot say, because of this, we cannot say that we are the final product. If gay consciousness were to enter into a final physiological product, it would have no genitals. And I know this sounds kind of crazy, but if we are to be coherent in the logic of gay identity, removing the intercourse, because it's not really made for that, asses, like we talked about millions of times, they're not meant to be fucked, but we continue doing it. So obviously there's some kind of program that keeps us stuck in the desire for it. And then when we remove it, the consciousness is then pushed into the level of the heart, into the level of the mind. And I believe this is an advantage. I don't believe that this is a disadvantage. I believe this is an advantage because I entered into this discussion with this higher level of consciousness as an assumption. I'm here interested in the outer levels, in the beyonds of the world, in the outer limits of our ability to express our gayness. And so sexuality, the intercourse, it holds us back. So the letting go of that gives birth to the ability to then express ourselves through emotion and through mind. And that, my friends, I believe is the fullness of the gay expression. We, as gay men, are living beings who are supposed to come together in complex social communities where we are coming into one another's lives through focus on the heart and emotion and the mental, the cerebral, the cognitive processes, not the sexual practices, because sexuality does not yield the kind of function that heterosexuality has. Therefore, the function is different, and the demand for that kind of behavior is also different because it doesn't produce the utility. And demand for it should be reduced. But because we are socially conditioned, we act it out. We are on this continuous loop of assuming that we have to have the intercourse, we have to fuck each other, that we have to do the things that straight people do. So as we enter into the future, we want to recognize that we are acting out all these sophisticated loops of conditioning by our culture, by heterosexuality. And to find our gayness is going to be almost impossible for most gay men. Most gay men are unlikely to ever actually be gay. technically speaking. Like the canonical gay is unavailable for most gay men because they are not going to understand themselves to a degree where they can let go of the anal intercourse and enter into that ontological, that more wholesome experience of sexuality. They're going to be fragmented by society, fragmented by the culture, by the hookup apps, by all the leaders out there who are psychopathic, sociopathic, narcissistic, all the people out there who are loud in their expression of sexual preferences by also disguising all the drama that's happening in their lives that causes men to have those sexual preferences that you never see. And so we are all conditioned by all these conflicting stories and conflicting ideas about sexuality. And ultimately, it's for you to stop all that irrationality, to stop all of that social conditioning, and actually start to think for yourself and to recognize who you really are. Because you're here on this planet only for a short amount of time. If you are not going to come into understanding of your gayness, of who you are, you're going to miss out on something that is very unique. When we look at the human history across the hundreds of thousands of years, the whole thing called gay thing, the gay consciousness, as kind of ridiculous as it sounds, it actually is something very special. We've been shamed to assume this is silly, but this is something that maybe thousands of years from now on, people are going to look at today and this whole gay community, and these people are going to say, you know, they had a chance to create an Atlantis kind of community. They had a chance to come together in a very unique way, but they never understood what this whole gay thing was about, so they wasted away the gay consciousness. And that's what everybody's doing today. We are all wasting away gay consciousness. And that's the bottom line. And that's why relationships are difficult. That's why we have to have these discussions about sex all the time, about how to show up for each other, because we need to remind ourselves about how to respect each other. Because all the forces of this world are teaching us to hurt each other, to devalue each other, to disregard each other's needs. And it seems like the whole world is against us. And so with these discussions and these explorations, we can bring back the truth, because the truth will set you free. And how? Because the truth gives you access to the experience of emotion that when you are not honest with yourself, you can't have access to. So the moment you recognize all that anal intercourse as humiliation and shame, the moment you recognize it for what it is, you can actually feel that shame, feel that humiliation, because now the truth has resurfaced to the top. And then you can address, why is it that you want to be humiliated? Why is it that you want to be shamed? Why is it that you want to be sadomasochized? What's wrong in your life? Why is there such a level of deprivation? Why are you hurting so much that you're willing to humiliate yourself over and over and over? And there's a reason for that. It's because you're alone, because you're anxious, you're stressed out, you are abandoned by parents, you're abandoned by society. And that's the root for all the things we do that hurt us. And by calling it for what it is, you can come into that realization. You can recognize that you're hurting when you're hurting. You can recognize when you're struggling when you are struggling, and not pretend that you're not. And it takes the truth to take you to that place. So we're going to finish this discussion here. I hope you enjoyed it. There's so much more to talk about in the context of sexuality. I promise more discussions about sex in the future. Those of you who are interested in a deeper dive with sexuality in a classroom kind of setting, there's a course I'll be launching in May called Evolution that summarizes a lot of the big ideas that we talked about today and many others, and gives you a step-by-step process for how to implement ontological sexuality in your life, how to understand sex for what it is, and how to live your life to the fullest. So those of you who are ready for a deeper dive into sexuality, please join me in the course Evolution. It launches in May 2022, and I'll be providing a link in the description. Please click on that link and register. And those of you who are ready to meet gay men in a loving, social environment where connections actually do happen, when men fall in love with each other, then please join us at the Big Gay Family social program. click on the link also below this video. It will take you to the Big Family enrollment process, and I'm super excited about seeing you in the program. So thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe if you are a new member to my channel, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next video.
What does it mean to be gay? Where do we come from? Why now? What's our purpose? What's our future? What is our function? How do we activate our power?